Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Attack on Titan anime review. This one's going to be for Season 4, Episode 3, The Door of Hope. And this was a great episode. This was primarily a backstory episode with Reiner, but it was more about just in general sort of backstory for like most of the Marley characters who we sort of only recently have realized are actually Marley characters. So, you know, Reiner, Bertolt, Annie, lots of characters just, here's the full context for the story. And I love how, like, at the start of this, like, final season, we're getting the last little bits of sort of connection all the way back to the very start of the series, of, like, the event that sort of started the series off. The Colossal Titan and the Armored Titan breaking through the walls. The big, amazing first episode of Attack on Titan. Here's the absolute full context behind how that happened. And of course, since we got some of the reveals, we knew the idea is that, okay, Bertolt and Reiner, just by the definition of time, how much time has passed, were relatively young when they did that, which is a shock. But actually seeing it here and sort of the scenes building up to it, the history of how they all were sort of chosen as a warrior to inherit one of the 9 Titans, it just comes together so nicely here. So this whole episode is really Reiner just reflecting on his past and just how he kind of feels about things, and just this conflicted nature of who he is now after having, had this all of his early life as the warrior in training, becoming the Armored Titan, and just believing completely in the, if you become a warrior and succeed, you will become an honorary Marleyan. And he completely believes that if he does that, it'll unite his family together. His mother will be able to live normally, he will, and his father will come back into their life. And this is the episode that I think highlights more than any of them what I suppose you could already figure out, but that the whole become an honorary Marleyan is a bit of a joke, that it doesn't mean anything, because of course, yes, you get to the military protect you to some degree, but they only protect you because as one of the 9 Titans you are one of the best weapons that Marley has. They don't actually care. You don't really become an honorary Marleyan. You just sort of become a war hero who sort of helps them to win battles. And just that moment of him meeting his father, and his father just having no interest of coming back into their life because he doesn't care about the fact that, like, her, the Eldian, devil, basically, and oh no, her son is a warrior. That's even worse. He just freaks out about that. So just that illusion of, like, the hope and dreams of accomplishing all of this shattered. And then just over the course of this, you see these ups and downs, and I think there's a big contrast or comparison here being made between Reiner and Eren, in that this episode basically confirms to us that Reiner, in terms of his own training to be a warrior, basically was the Eren type of character who struggled, did what he could to make it happen, and like his passion was sort of the main thing that he had over any specific skill. And that's what kind of makes him stand out, but he has to try so hard to get there. And I think that's why they've ultimately compared Reiner and Eren and paired them off, I suppose, quite a lot over the course of the series, and how there is this dynamic of them as sort of rivals, but also as, like, they're very similar characters ultimately, who we obviously know Eren really well at this point, and he's obviously, as we see him at the end of the episode, still dealing with, and this is going to be our first introduction to just the character as he is now after discovering sort of the truth of the world and what I guess they've decided to do in these last few years. Whereas Reiner, of course, is, I suppose, more struggling from these two stages of his life sort of conflicting with each other, of him sort of knowing all of the lies about being a sort of loyal to Marley Eldian, compared to realizing that actually a lot of the people he met as part of the Scouts are just normal people, as he talked about in the last episode. And he has this huge contrast because he actually does sort of view them as friends, and has to accept that like he did all these terrible things, that he was the one who broke through the walls, and that they did this, and it's just such an interesting position for him to be in, to the point where you get to that scene where he is about to kill himself, and it's only the glimpse of, you know, Falco ends up sort of accidentally kind of knocking on the other side of the wall, that he realizes no, he has to stay to try and, I suppose, help the new generation of warriors, I suppose, maybe not go through what he went through, but you're not really sure what exact approach he's going to take. But yeah, so many little details and reveals in this episode, like that Marcel, who of course we prior, I think, to more or less this episode, we pretty much just viewed as being like, oh yeah, he was the other one who got killed so that Ymir could become the Jaw Titan. But actually, he was relatively important in this episode in that Reiner of the Seven was the one who stood out the least and was likely not going to get picked to inherit a Titan. But Marcel, as like the best of them, was obviously chosen as the leader. He got picked to be one of the Titans, but then he spoke out so that his brother wouldn't get picked, and that Reiner would. So that's the only reason Reiner actually achieved his position, and it was Marcel trying to protect his brother. But he realizes that, like, in doing so, he has also basically been the one to make the decision for Reiner that, oh yeah, I've just committed you to this, that you're going to die in 13 years because of basically a decision I forced to happen. And that is the character development behind why Marcel would sort of, you know, sacrifice himself to save Reiner from Ymir, and that's why Marcel was eaten. It was sort of his sort of redemption, kind of, in a way, for basically almost like just forcing Reiner to become one of the 9 Titans. And then that moment is what turns Reiner from being the sort of weaker character of the group into having this different personality, in that like Annie like viciously like beats him up, and he just turns at this point. He basically sort of becomes Marcel. He becomes the leader that the team needs, and this is, I suppose, basically where his conflicting personalities comes from, of like the person he was like before, more like Eren, then forced to become the sort of field commander now that their actual leader is gone. And then of course, you know, he ends up, you know, becoming quite close with some of the other members of the Scouting Legion, but he's also trying to act like he doesn't care, as we sort of saw in the last episode with, you know, that fascinating scene as he talked about them as if they are Eldian devils, but just mentioned like basically completely normal sort of character traits about them. And it's such an interesting idea of like his situation has just transformed him into this like kind of mess of a character who you can only feel sorry for. You can't excuse him for, of course, causing the sort of series like starting event, but you know, it's hard to not just like see the focus that they've given him in these last few episodes, and like not just realize that, like pretty much all of the warriors, they're all just like victims of what's going on here, forced to do this to survive. And you know, it makes you really dislike the leaders of Marley, for sure. So that's that. But yeah, it was cool to see a lot of these scenes of just like the specifics of like why they pick each specific member to be one of the Titans, and that like straight away they just go through like 6 of the different Titans, and they're just like, we're choosing this person to be this Titan because of this. We got to see a younger Zeke as well, which was pretty nice, because I suppose his current design, it makes him seem like really like kind of much older than you maybe think he is, but then this scene puts it a little bit more into perspective, that like he's not that old as he potentially looks in some of the scenes. So that was nice to have that context. But yeah, like lots of details, like in terms of like, oh, here's the proper explanation about like why the female Titan wasn't involved in that initial attack. A question I'd never properly even considered, but yeah, like it should have been the obvious question to ask, because yeah, Annie's part of their group, but she didn't participate that day. And it's because Reiner basically, I suppose, in response to her like not being the leader but like attacking him, he assumes the leadership role and sort of chokes her out basically. So just he and Bertold go through with the attack, and then she wakes up later on when they're acting as people who've survived the attack, and she just finds out it's happened already. So that was pretty interesting. They also give some context behind. I believe what they're going for here is that Berthold told a story in one of the first episodes of the series, and they covered them meeting this member of the military who basically tells the same story. So to act as this sort of like backstory behind like sort of cover for like how they've been here despite not actually having lived here at all, they come up with a backstory which is just copying it from this soldier, which was some really nice little bits of detail in terms of just how well planned out so many of this stuff actually was. But yeah, I suppose about the last thing is, yeah, the very end scene. So Falco talks to the same soldier, the same Eldian soldier he was talking to. He got a little bit of focus in the last episode, and I did have a feeling. I don't think I mentioned it in the review, but I'm kind of like, is this Eren undercover? Because I think after the first episode, you sort of had a feeling that like, okay, we've seen John, however you pronounce his name, in the first episode. So there's a sense of like, okay, Paradise Island, they're sort of spying on the Marleyans here, and then it's just like, that looks kind of like Eren, sort of just with long hair. And then this episode obviously confirms that. So it was really cool to actually see that like, okay, Eren's here, one of the other characters is here, something's going to happen. Because again, let's not forget from the last episode that the plan is to have the Tybur family speak at some sort of a big meeting, big announcement, and I get the impression suddenly there's a big attack from Paradise Island is going to come. So I think that's why they're setting up a lot of the characters suddenly in the crowd. And obviously it makes sense in terms of the tactics that Marley have used, which is, I suppose, really careful with the tactics utilizing Titan shifters like undercover. Now Paradise Island is going to do that, in that Eren is just right here, and he could turn into a Titan whenever he needs to. And I suppose, you know, if Armin is around, they have him just kind of ready to go as well. And that's just really, really interesting to me. So, I suppose the one thing that this puts into perspective is that we got a little bit more Annie here, a character you almost forget what exactly happened to her, but she should still be covered in her kind of hardening crystal. So I'm guessing this is the season where we're going to have to see her come out of that and see what on earth they're doing with her character in the aftermath of all of this. Now that they've, you know, obviously Bertold is dead, Reiner's dealing with the history of what they've done. How's Annie dealing with this as well? So that's going to be a really cool thing as well. But yeah, Eren has infiltrated, and just his talk to Falco here is quite interesting in that, you know, from one perspective, yes, these are his enemies, but he's also among his people here, the Eldians, and he's discovered the truth, and he's seeing, I suppose, here how brainwashed they are. He's seeing how the higher-ups of Marley, the actual Marleyans, use the Eldians, that they're their frontline troops, they sacrifice them, they train up the ones that are talented to become the Titans, and then they use them to be the main force of the military. That this should, I suppose, to Eren, double down like who the true enemy is, that it's the normal people of Marley, and that I suppose the conflict here is with Eren is perhaps going to be like, you know, he's probably going to have to, as part of the plan, they're going to have to try and get the other Titans away from Marley to claim them on the other side of things and go from there. Meaning he might have to, you know, fight other Eldians to gain their powers, but the main enemy is Marley itself. And obviously, like, this is covering Eren as he was right at the end of last season, where he went from, probably what felt like some of his like greatest success in terms of winning and things working out for them, then finally finding the sea. But then, because of the truth that they discovered, just realizing that, okay, they're free to sort of, I suppose, travel to the rest of the world, but now they realize that them as a people are just treated as devils by effectively the main power on the other side of the world. And just that they have now opened themselves up to the rest of the world, and all they have found is more hate, more war. And I suppose that's the jaded character of Eren that we have here, who realizes that they need to, I suppose, fight Marley. That's the enemy. But that human versus human conflict, again, is not really what he wants. But I suppose that's going to be the fascinating thing now that he's been, I suppose, properly introduced. What is the plan on the Paradise Island side of things, and where exactly is Eren at in all of this? But once again, really, really liked the episode. The amount of connections it made Reiner so much more interesting, Annie more interesting, Bertolt retroactively more interesting. And yeah, just a lot of the continuity stuff here really was fantastic. So they're my thoughts on the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.